Hello everyone and welcome back to DMG. Today I'm going to be covering probably the strangest thing I've ever covered on this channel. A very, very weird motherboard that cost me only $30. Brand new. This is a sealed inbox board. But that is by far not the strangest part. So watch all the way to the end, as I'm going to discuss the very interesting features of this board. I'm going to preface this by saying most of us have probably heard of those Chinese boards using an LGA 2011 socket and whatever chipset they can find that's just like overstocked to throw together a somewhat working system. Those are pretty interesting. They can be an actually decent start to a good budget gaming PC. You can get, a 10, 12 core CPU that goes in a 2011 socket for under $100, pair it with one of those sub $100 boards, and then, throw in some other stuff and you've got a, $500 pretty capable gaming PC. So accounting for the rest of the system costs, that's a pretty good investment if you want a decent computer but don't want to pay too much. So they can be a solid entry for enthusiasts short on cash getting into hardware, and are a reasonable purchase for gamers. But the board I'm about to show you, I have absolutely no clue why it even exists. So I'll get back into the technical side a bit later, but right now I'm just going to open it up. Now first I'm going to go off the script and say I'm already impressed. These thrown together boards often have, they just come poorly packaged, minimal bubble wrap in a just brown box, but this actually is printed. It says motherboard, and it's the shiny kind of cardboard. Of course it came in a packing envelope, but I took it out of there because I wanted to make sure I was showing the correct thing on video, but I haven't actually opened the board yet. Here we go. It's a pretty beat up box here. It's got the same thing printed on both of the sides, like the big sides. Again, going off the script here, but it says all solid capacitors, USB port, PCB. Wow, I'm so glad that my motherboard is a PCB, and a security port. I assume that's like a translation error because it says efficient and stable rapid transmission, and then shows a RAM stick. So I would just assume that's like a translation thing. Okay, so let's just open up the box here. We've got this nice, just for protection, it comes with an I/O shield. That's nice. We get a SATA cable. A lot of modern boards don't even do that. You get some thermal paste, and looks like some cooler mounting screws. So already I'm impressed, and there's packaging inside the box. So this is actually really exceeding my expectations. Let me just slide out this weird board here and just set it down. Just take a moment to take this all in. It probably doesn't look very much like a motherboard you've ever seen before. At first glance, yeah, it's obviously a PC motherboard, but then you start noticing really weird stuff. Now, first of all, it's a nice matte black color, probably to match the ashes from which this 14-year-old chipset was dug up. So it's using a very old chipset. As evidence of such an old chipset, you have, two main chipsets. You've got a Northbridge and Southbridge, which died off in the late 2000s, and, pretty much every motherboard since has had a single chipset instead of two. So you can see we've got a really old board here. Then there's the obvious, very strange power connector placement. Why are they here? Usually you see them along the top edge or sometimes over here, but they put them in literally the most inconvenient place, by the I/O. So you've got your 4-pin and your 24-pin. You would think that would intersect with the GPU you have plugged into the PCIe 16X slot. It's also a prime spot for cables to get sucked into a rear fan, which also you won't be having many fans because there's only one fan header on this board. Yes, some Dell boards in the BTX form factor from around this era had power connectors in a similar place, but they definitely weren't right behind the I/O. That's just a very strange place to put them. Also, our VRM here, I just want to point this out, doesn't look like any motherboard VRM I've ever seen before. It doesn't look too good. Also, this CMOS battery, I've never seen it in between the CPU and RAM slots. Usually the RAM slots are right by the socket and chipset, you know, to reduce latency, but the CMOS battery is right there. Instead of like down here where it usually is, the CPU socket is much farther towards the top of the board than I've ever seen. It's just a very strange form factor. You only get a single 16X slot and a single PCI slot. Usually on, you know, these era boards, your slots are 1X, 16X, PCI, PCI, but it just forgoes most of them. Also, back to the memory slots, they're DDR2, not DDR3. There are 4, which is a nice feature on this era of board, but the CPUs that go in that socket, which I will talk about later, support DDR2 and DDR3. So you would think on a modern board that's made today, because DDR3 is pretty common to find used, they would use, you know, DDR3. But no, these are DDR2 sockets. Now the rest of the I/O is pretty typical, but a little lacking. You've got your headers for front panel, all of that. You've got 4 SATA ports, but no IDE or floppy, so not a very good choice for a retro build. A VGA port could go there, a parallel port could go there, but you don't really have too much going on there. The back I/O is pretty lacking. You just have 2 USB 2.0, Ethernet, audio, PS2, and serial. So yeah, it's definitely manufactured to cost. Anyway, enough of, you know, talking about its appearance. Here's the actual tech specs. Apparently, it uses a P45 chipset released in 2008 for the final years of the 775 socket. That's the strangest part. Why make a new board with a very old chipset? You know, LGA 775, the highest core count CPU that can go in the socket is quad core. And I hate to say it, but that's useless to most people today. Even just for web browsing, the most powerful Core 2 quads do start to struggle. Yes, you can still do web browsing, watching YouTube, gaming on some high-end Core 2 quads, but they suck down a lot of power to give you the same performance as a cheap laptop chip. So it's really not worth it to get into this socket. So that brings me, like, unless you're doing enthusiast overclocking, that kind of thing, or just want to build a retro system. But that brings me to my next point of why does this exist? So there are 2 potential reasons you'd buy a 775 board. 1, if you want a cheap motherboard. But then you would probably get something like this Gigabyte board. I know, I have a tablet, how fancy. You'd probably get something like this Gigabyte board for also $30. It's, you know, decent condition. It has way more I/O. You only get 2 RAM slots, but you've got normal power connector placement. So like an actual board from the era would make more sense. Or if you're a company that needs a specific, you know, server for something that uses LGA 775. First of all, most server chips use LGA 771, which is a little different. I'll talk about that later. But you're going to replace it with the same proprietary HP motherboard that you buy from a supplier. You're not going to buy some random board for eBay, wait for it 3 months to show up, and then put in this random board. No, you're going to get an exact replacement if you need that specific hardware. So I don't understand what niche this fills. There's really no demand for it, which is why they're so cheap on eBay, probably. I should also mention that the same seller was selling a lot of like other weird knockoff boards. So like, here's the one that I bought. Note that it says PCTE16X. I thought that was kind of funny. But, you know, here's the board I bought. They were also selling this one. Looks similar but has 2 RAM slots, VGA, and some colorful slots. And apparently has the 945 chipset instead of the P45. Then they were also selling this one, which is pretty similar to the last one. Like, they were selling probably like 30 of these, but I only screenshotted a few. They were also selling this X58 board for a little more. And they were also selling a couple of these, like, graphics cards that look not too great. So yes, this seller was selling quite a lot of, like, rebranded, remanufactured things. Now, this board claimed to be compatible with LGA 771 Xeons. LGA 771 was a completely different socket from 775. Although you can mod 771 chips to fit in a 775 socket. So I know a lot of people do that. But honestly, they're going to perform probably just as badly as a Core 2 quad from the era. But you can get them a bit cheaper. So this board claims to support those Xeon chips, even though its chipset technically does not. So do let me know if you want me to buy one of those Xeons and mod it and see if it works. But you can buy pre-modded Xeons, 771 Xeons for 775 sockets off eBay, AliExpress, and I guess it's for boards like these. And it actually looks like this is interesting. So it's got a jumper here. See right here? So it has a jumper for selecting a 775 or 771 CPU. So you would just move this jumper block around to connect the other jumpers. Wow. Alright, so here's our 775 socket. This looks like a very cheap socket protector. Like, this does not look very sturdy. And why is the socket lever so weird? A fresh 775 socket. I never thought I would say that. Let me remind you that this board is literally brand new. In you know, late 2023, you can still buy a brand new board with a chipset from 15 years ago. It's just fascinating. So I've got every CPU series released on the 775 socket, not counting like Core 2 Extreme, because those are the same as the Core 2 Duo and Quad CPUs, but just with an unlocked multiplier. So we have a Pentium dual core, a Pentium 4, a Core 2 Duo, and a Core 2 Quad of varying FSB speeds, wattages, all of that. Now I'm really interested to see how the Pentium 4 performs, or if it works on this board at all, I should say, because technically this chipset isn't compatible with Pentium chips, but with a board like this, anything could happen. So I'm going to show a more detailed list of the CPUs that I've got here. So here are my CPUs for those who are interested. So those are what I'm going to be using. And also, I have a lot of DDR2, like a lot. So I'm going to be testing a lot of different RAM speeds and, you know, different kits. I'm going to be changing module capacity, number of modules, their rank, like one rank by 8, one rank by 16, that kind of thing. And also seeing if timings matter on this board, because again, compatibility with these like remanufactured boards with old chipsets are often, you know, really finicky. Alright, here we go. I've got a test bench set up. It feels so wrong plugging in the power connectors over there. I am missing a display output, so I'm going to grab a video card. I just got to take the bracket off here. I'm going to be using the 9300 GE, which is the worst video card I have. but it's going to provide a nice little display output for us. Whoops. What is this? What is this locking mechanism? The heck? That's interesting. I've never seen that. So you... Oh. Look at this. The end of the RAM slot intersects with the GPU, so you can't put in RAM while your GPU's installed. This is the problem with these weird layout boards. Like, there's a reason motherboards are not made like this. It's because this layout sucks. With all due respect, I hate it. So, oh yeah, I don't have the little screw things. Where's connector number 1? Here we go. So I'm plugging in a DVI display. I'm gonna have a second camera on aforementioned monitor, so I don't have to keep moving it back and forth. So I'm just gonna put whichever camera on screen that needs to be on screen, if that makes any sense. Oh, you know what I'm gonna need? A CPU cooler, which is good. I basically got scammed here. It's basically an Intel stock cooler, but I paid like 15 bucks for it because I needed a 775 cooler, and this was the cheapest one. I didn't realize that it had pre-applied thermal paste. I thought this was a thing I needed to peel off, so you can see right there where I stuck my idiot finger in it. Yeah, I'm a good YouTuber. I'm a professional computerist. I think we're going to start out with the most compatible CPU of them all. It's a Core 2 Duo E8400. There we go. Then I think I'm going to start out with a pretty compatible RAM kit. Are the slots labeled? Yes. A single 2 GB stick of DDR2. I don't need to fully snap that down because I'm probably going to take out the CPU in like 30 seconds anyway. Okay, so CPU cooler is on. Now we just need our hard drive, which I have right here. I labeled my hard drives with what's on them, so that's why it's labeled. Let's see. Okay, SATA power is connected. And I might as well use the SATA cable that came in the bag to get the authentic $30 motherboard experience. Here we go. I've got a blue light. No activity yet. We've got hard drive. I think the CPU is getting a little too hot because the fan just had some fun there. I'm always a bit reluctant to snap in these clips because of how likely they are to just break. I've had it happen before. Come on. I might go with a little Pentium dual core. Then I don't want to change too many things at once, but I'm also going to switch to some different RAM. This is DDR2 666, just in case it does not support DDR2 800. Since I do not have a manual, I don't know what its, configuration is for RAM. So I guess we're just going to have to find out by trying. This weird PCIe slot connector is, really confusing me. Maybe that's the, security connector it was talking about on the front of the box. I've just never seen it done that way. For good reason. And the reset button doesn't work when it's doing that. So I have no clue what is going on here. It could just be that the board doesn't work. That might be what is going on. Maybe it has an incompatibility with turning on. Oh wait, that's not BMS59, that's DVI. Here we go. I'll raise that up a bit so the GPU is like flat. Let's see what it thinks of this little Radeon card. If its fans just go to max, then that's also very bad. I don't know what's going on here. It should be working. Yet, alas, it is not. I'm sorry, I'm going to film with the hand camera for a little bit and just kind of walk you through what I'm doing because I'm thoroughly confused. So, one of the CPUs that I was using in the socket in there, I've thrown in the Optiplex to make sure it still works. And, check it out. The CPU still works fine. And that's after putting it in the socket in all 4 ways. And let me explain what I mean there. So I'll show you on this socket once that light turns off. So in a normal 775 socket, you have these little pins. I don't mean the actual pins, I mean these things. That little black part that sticks out into the socket. I'm sorry this camera doesn't focus very well. So those are there on every other socket. But to mod it for 771 chips, you need to take those out. So it doesn't have those. You can see there's a hole in the pins where it would be, but it's just a space. There's no actual plastic piece that sticks up there. Meaning the chip, you can very well put it in the socket in any direction. So usually it goes little arrow in the corner towards the end of the socket lever. And that's how it works. And this black label goes towards this approximately same sized thing. But I tried putting in this way, and let's see, where's the CPU I pulled out of the Optiplex? I think this was it. I'm sorry, I just have too many of these. No, it was this one. So I tried putting it in this way, and I've already done this and it didn't kill it, so, you know, modern CPUs are very resilient. And again, this is a modern CPU. It's like, you know, last 20 years, that counts as modern. I've got this RAM kit in there right now, but it didn't work with any of the other kits that I tried. So it's not a RAM issue. But the interesting thing is, it seems to recognize that I did something wrong and doesn't even start to ramp the fans up when I put in a CPU the entirely wrong way. CPU fan barely spins. We get this slow red blinking light, and that's the end of it, and no signal on the monitor. So when I put the CPU in the correct way, it's doing something, it's initializing something, but I don't know what it's trying to initialize, and it definitely seems to be failing somewhere. So I'm going to continue troubleshooting. I've contacted the seller and they've actually given me a refund, but because of the shipping cost and time from China, I wouldn't be able to get a replacement board in time to make this video. So if you want me to buy another board, drop a comment, but at this point I wouldn't recommend buying one of these boards already just because of its weird configuration. Just buy a good board, and if you do want to mod it for 771, it's not too hard. I hate to say it, but I think this board is just baked. As in dead, not working, and can't work. Now, this video did not turn out the way I was hoping. I was really hoping that it would at least work. I spent, hours writing a script, preparing for this video, because, I wanted it to be an actually good content piece. But please, if anyone has any suggestions, do let me know. I'm not gonna buy a 771 CPU unless I know this board works, because then I'm just gonna have a 771 CPU sitting around, and I don't think the failure is with it detecting the CPU or whatever. Like, the jumpers are set correct to 775. Actually, really quickly, let's just... what if we take them off? I'll try no jumpers, and then I'll try with 771 jumpers, because I've actually had experience with things being labeled backwards, incorrectly, etc. on boards. Also, this RAM slot is blocking the GPU from going in all the way, so I have to put that there so that the graphics card can fully socket in. Could have also been another problem that the PCIe slot was preventing the GPU from going all the way in, because I'm so sorry for the shaky footage, but look, I mean, you can't put the GPU in while that RAM slot is out. But yeah, no jumpers on the board. Now this could kill the chip, but if so, I'm fine with it. It's a Pentium, and I have like 4 more of them. It's these super low-end chips that I really don't care about. No aggressive fan ramp. Now we get an aggressive fan ramp. Took longer to do the aggressive... ow! Jesus. To do the aggressive fan ramp. Here we go. Now I'm going to put it on 771 mode. But I think the voltages for 775 and 771 are different. Hence, why this chip might die today. It's like 2 cores, 2 threads, barely over 2 gigahertz, and they're like $4 on eBay. So it's not a valuable chip. I'm not killing retro hardware senselessly. Plus, again, modern CPUs are resilient as heck. Plus, I could put CPU explosion in the title and get thousands of views. Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. It actually showed the most promising signs of life while the CPU was completely wrong in the socket. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. What if I take the CPU out of the equation and I just start it bare socket? Same thing. So I would have a feeling that it's a short either in the VRM and the power delivery, like a short or cut wire or something in the CPU power delivery, or like a damaged connection in the socket. Because if it does the same thing with no CPU that it does with a fully working CPU that, you know, you just saw worked in this Optiplex, I'm going to drop it in there one more time just to prove. But yeah, this is the same CPU, and the Dell works fine. So,
that will be it for this video. I'm gonna keep doing testing. If I discover something, I will definitely cover it. But that is it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. I know it didn't quite turn out the way I wanted it to, but still, the hardware aspect of this board is pretty fascinating. But yeah, I'll wrap it up here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.